Okay, I think we can get started. I will turn it over to Rebecca to welcome everybody.
Thanks so much. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. I think that most of you are members, so it's so good to see you for joining us for today's call on clean energy. Today, we've got a whole team that can tell us about the opportunities within the city and ways that we can include this in our development. Our presenters today are Nikki Vandervoort with Clean Energy and Climate Resilience Manager of the City of Cincinnati, Andy Holzhauser, partner and CFO of Donovan Energy, and Wyatt Ross, building performance engineer with CMTA. And they'll be going through the presentation today for us. I don't want to take up any more of your time, but again, thanks for being with us, and I'm going to turn it over to the team.
All right, thank you, Rebecca. And thank you all for joining us this morning, bright and early. My name is Nikki Vandervoort. I work at the City of Cincinnati, and my role here is on the energy team. And we are focused on reaching our energy goals that are established in the Green Cincinnati Plan across sectors for residents and multifamily and businesses and nonprofits and houses of worship. We have partners all across the community. And one awesome thing that recently happened in the last year was that we won a grant. It's called the Municipal Investment Fund, and that's what's funding this workshop series. This is one of a number of other workshops that we're doing this month, Happy Earth Month. So the Municipal Investment Fund is an EPA grant. We are one of 49 communities across the nation, and it's meant to do market building activities for clean energy, zero emissions buildings, and zero emissions transportation. Market building activities meaning they're not tied to specific projects. So we're doing a lot of community education, contractor and building operations managers, trainings, that sort of thing. We recently delivered our public-private partnership plan and our community-wide project pipeline. Essentially, the grantee on this grant, Coalition for Green Capital, they are working to establish a national green bank. And so this work that we're doing through the MIF is meant to attract public and private investment into our greater Cincinnati region to promote those clean energy, zero emissions buildings, zero emissions transportation type projects. So we're running through the end of April. And next slide. I'll speak a little bit more to the Green Cincinnati Plan, recognizing that you're not all joining us from within the city, but this is a grant that is sort of energizing our entire local market. So happy to see anybody here from Northern Kentucky and beyond Cincinnati. But in the city of Cincinnati, we have our Green Cincinnati Plan. That's essentially our sustainability plan, our climate action plan, all rolled into one. And it has 8 focus areas. Today, we're going to be focusing in the buildings and energy area, but our office covers a number of other areas, including food security, mobility, natural systems, certainly zero waste. Our office runs the recycling program out of the city of Cincinnati. And the Green Cincinnati Plan has a goal of 50% carbon emissions reductions by 2030 and a 100% carbon neutral goal by 2050. Next slide. Just to give you a taste of what some of the programs related to energy are in our office. So these are all listed here. They're not necessarily all relevant for multifamily tenants and owners, but I do want to highlight a couple of them here. So Warm Up Cincy is our program that kind of is our umbrella for preventing utility disconnections, making in-unit and whole building energy efficiency upgrades, and providing energy education. And so our 3 sort of sub-tier programs underneath that is this MECUP program, the Multifamily Energy Efficiency Capital Upgrades Program. This is a research study that's ongoing right now with Green Umbrella and some partners at some universities to understand how building upgrades in affordable historic buildings are connected to energy affordability, air quality, and resident comfort in their own homes. And then we have a partnership with the city's Department of Buildings and Inspections through the Home Repair Service Program, where we enhance their improvements to particularly situations where building owners or renters cannot afford to make upgrades that are in code violation. We make enhancements to make sure that if they need a new boiler, they're getting like potentially an energy efficient heat pump instead. And finally, renter and landlord energy efficiency engagement, or our Rally program, that's providing short-term and long-term solutions for both renters in utility like arrears payments and support, as well as supporting landlords through building upgrades. And that's with our partner Strategies to End Homelessness. They work through their partnership with the Free Store Food Bank and Talbert House. And then it's not on this slide, but I do want to mention that we have a pretty exciting research study that we're working on in conjunction with the ACEEE, the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy. They are looking at the feasibility of utilizing window heat pumps for energy upgrades for in-unit heating and cooling as an affordable means to not only achieve energy efficiency and heating and cooling in multifamily buildings, but also just the level of comfort that can be had through having those types of technologies in unit. So I think that's it for me. I'm going to pass it off to, one more slide. Workforce development. This is the program that the city is focused on because we have a key goal in our Green Cincinnati plan to employ 4,000 people in green jobs by 2028. So about a year ago, we released with the brilliant support of the Cincinnati Chamber, the Cincinnati Green Workforce Landscape Analysis Report, which really just demonstrated that there is a lot of opportunity to grow across the green field in the greater Cincinnati area. We've connected $150,000 to 6 training organizations through our Office of Seeds of Change granting program for green workforce training programs. Launched a Building Performance Institute training pilot, and I will say that we have one more cohort of that towards the end of this month to train folks in the building science principles and building analyst technician certifications. And then also, if you're available for the Earth Day celebration down at Washington Park, that's happening on April 19th, and there will be a whole section of the celebration devoted to the Green Jobs Summit. If you're curious to learn more, there will be a number of panels with great local experts and speakers. If you want to know anything more about our workforce development program, you can reach out to my colleague, Thanapat. His contact is at the bottom of this slide. Now I can turn it over to Andy and Donovan. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Nikki. Great to be with you all. Thank you to Rebecca and the Apartment Association for co-hosting this with us and with my friends at the city and at CMTA. Donovan Energy is a locally based firm. We've been around for almost exactly 10 years, and we kind of live at the intersection of clean energy project development and clean energy finance. And so we've been in the space doing different things. Today, we're going to focus mostly from our perspective in the finance world, and looking forward to getting into the solutions that hopefully enlighten some folks and help advance some projects forward. We've also been a part of, for the last couple of years, a really important collaborative effort that's occurred that I hope everyone's familiar with so far. And if you're not, this is an introduction to the Cincinnati Green Bank Collaborative that's been working hard with a number of partners listed there at the bottom to advance innovative solutions to develop more access to capital to decarbonize homes and buildings at the end of the day. These solutions aren't easy, so it takes partners to not only put together their resources, but act then in unison to local, state, and national funders to bring more resources to bear here. There are some newly launched financing programs that both the Cincinnati Development Fund and the Port have designed, serving both single and multifamily. We'll talk a little bit more about the multifamily later in the presentation. And it's a very exciting effort that is legally housed inside of the Cincinnati Development Fund, although despite the name Green Bank, it is not a regulated depository institution so much as a program, a really series of programs that is put together to add scale and capacity for clean energy financing, much of which is driven by both public and private partners to leverage up the funding. This slide probably speaks for itself, and I won't be the 1,000th person in the last year to talk in great detail about the increasing cost of electricity and all the reasons why it's happening, but it is unprecedented, at least in 30 years, if not longer, in terms of what is happening to the costs, particularly of electricity, but of energy altogether. We know that there's some of the highest demands for particularly electricity now than we've seen in most of our lifetimes. And that means new price signals. That means innovation is necessary when it comes to financing. But at the end of the day, as multifamily building owners, you have not only your own energy bills, but you have tenants that have energy bills. And there's been a considerable increase in rates just in the Duke Energy sort of regulated price to compare rate of about 30%. Over the last year or so, which is in comparison to what we in the energy industry generally do, which is assume a 3% year-over-year increase in electricity. And now we're talking 10x that. It's not going to be 10x every year, but we've just accounted for 10 years of increase in 1 year. And so it is an extraordinary time. At the end of the day, energy efficiency, renewable energy investments are even more cost effective if there's a silver lining in any of this. And so it's our job not so much to cure all the problems with the electric grid as much as it is to be able to bring you as building owners and developers, hopefully some new or enhanced solutions to add to your toolbox. And so I'm going to kick it over to Wyatt to introduce you a little bit more to CMTA and get into some of the building technologies we want to spend time with you on today.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. Thanks, everybody. Great to be with you. So I'll start with just a brief introduction into CMTA. We are a MEP engineering firm, so we're focused on HVAC, electrical, plumbing, fire protection, security, all the fun stuff in our buildings. But we also have a long history of being focused on high performance design, including zero energy buildings, net zero, carbon neutral, health and wellness, all of those great things. And so we're based in Louisville, Kentucky, but we also have an office here in Cincinnati, which is where I am based out of. Next slide. So to Andy's point, obviously energy efficiency is always been, but is especially a focus right now as energy prices are escalating. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as it applies to multifamily buildings. And so if you go to the next slide. So when I like to talk about energy efficiency, I think it's important that we kind of follow the energy, right? And so when we look at the Midwest in general, as far as multifamily buildings go and what drives energy use in those building typologies, as you can see here, the largest driver is kind of split between space heating and water heating, with roughly 10-ish% going to air conditioning, and then the remainder being all of your miscellaneous loads, whether that's lighting or appliances or different plug loads in the building. So our benchmark EUI, if you're not familiar with the term EUI, it's essentially the miles per gallon metric for buildings, but it is the energy use intensity. So it's telling us how much energy per square foot per year a building's using. And so according to Energy Star in 2024, that median EUI for multifamily buildings was 60. And so when we talk about energy efficiency, it's really how do we drive down from there. And so if we jump to the next slide, we are not going to be able to get into everything today. We could probably do a whole hour and a half on just some of these energy efficiency strategies, but I do want to cover some of the big hitters and also point to some really valuable resources. And so I guess I will start by saying the Advanced Energy Design Guide that's published by ASHRAE for multifamily buildings is a tremendous resource for anyone trying to think through how they can make multifamily buildings more efficient. It is focused on zero energy, but I wouldn't let that scare you. A lot of the strategies and menu of strategies that are listed in there are universally applicable, and it's not just for achieving net zero energy. They can be applied at varying degrees, and I would say all of them being focused on multifamily are also kind of orbiting around the financial feasibility of implementing those strategies as well. So they know that a lot of multifamily projects are developer-led. They want to make design strategies that are cost-effective through that lens. So would point to that tremendous resource. If you haven't seen it, it's free to download. And there's a link on the bottom there. But overall, in general, we're thinking about how do we target efficiency in multifamily buildings. We're all about setting performance targets. And so, if the benchmark EUI is 60, we think it's, fairly achievable with some of these design strategies to bring EUIs down all the way to 25, which is over a 50% reduction. So to do that, one of the main things we want to focus on is a high performance envelope. So unlike a lot of buildings that are, have a lot of internal gains, high equipment loads, our multifamily buildings are largely envelope driven. So if you think about a lot of surface area, a lot of places for heat to leak out of a building, that is ultimately in our slightly heating dominant climate in Cincinnati what drives energy use in our buildings, and that is why heating energy is the primary driver of multifamily energy use. And so if we can put kind of a thick coat around our buildings with continuous insulation, make sure that we're sealing up our buildings really well, and so that we're not leaking all of that air that we're heating in our building out into the environment. And really that kind of starts with quality control on the construction side. And so doing pressure testing during either during a renovation or during new construction is really important for making sure that you're actually getting that real performance in your design. And then leveraging passive strategies, insulation, air sealing, all of those are some passive strategies, but especially in ground up new construction or in renovations or facade replacements, thinking about the orientation of the building, the massing of the building, and in particular opportunities to maximize or optimize shading so that we're leveraging solar gain to help us heat our buildings in the winter, but using shading to block that sun and help us cool the buildings in the summer. And so all of those things go a really long way to driving down the heating energy use that we saw in that first slide. On the HVAC and water heating side, we're seeing a big shift across the market to heat pumps in general, both air source and ground source. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that. But that is a huge opportunity to increase the efficiency of our system. So we'll reduce loads in our buildings first through high performance envelopes. But then when we do have to actively heat and we actively have to cool, and we definitely have to provide hot water for showers and sinks and everything else, we can do that much more efficiently through heat pump design. We also want to be utilizing heat energy recovery. There's a lot of waste heat throughout multifamily buildings whenever you exhaust air for your stove oven ranges or kitchen hoods. Common spaces are ventilated and all of that exhaust air is leaving the building. There's sanitary water that is leaving the building that has excess heat that can be recovered. And so those are great opportunities for heat recovery. Thermal storage is a great application for reducing peak loads. It can also reduce how much total HVAC or domestic hot water equipment capacity has to be installed. And then we ultimately want to, make sure that, again, we're reducing loads as much as possible. And so using really efficient fixtures that consume water. So sinks, faucets, toilets, etc. And then also really efficient domestic hot water distribution, making sure that we don't have a ton of excess piping where we're losing energy through. And then on the appliances side, kind of the third big bucket in multifamily energy use, we want to switch to all electric equipment for kitchen, especially for the kitchen. This not only saves a ton of energy, but it's also much better for indoor air quality. So there's a lot of studies on that, especially in reducing asthma risk for children. So, there's a lot of synergies between energy efficiency and health and wellness in the built environment as well. Next slide. So we won't spend a ton of time getting into all the nuance of heat pumps, but as much as I would love to, but just kind of hit high level, kind of why this matters. Again, energy prices are obviously, highly variable right now and fluctuating, both electricity and natural gas, and electricity in particular is increasing. And so heat pumps provide a great opportunity for reducing energy use and also lowering our utility bills in multifamily applications. So they're typically 3 to 5 times more efficient than your comparable electric resistance heating furnace or gas furnace. They also have the added benefit of being a single, piece of equipment that's providing both heating and cooling, which kind of simplifies some of the utilities that have to be brought to the building. And then it also, again, on the air quality piece, eliminates any on-site combustion. So that's a huge benefit, not only for tenant health and wellness, but also for community health and wellness as well. In terms of applications, I think the big takeaway here is that, several years ago, 5 years, 10 years ago, heat pumps used to have a fairly limited set of applications and technologies that you could deploy. At this point, the applications are highly variable, and so there's a lot of flexibility in how you would leverage heat pumps on your building. And so in terms of source, as pictured here, you could have air source equipment that's leveraging the ambient air for heating and cooling. More popular now, or becoming more popular now, is ground source heat pump equipment that's leveraging thermal exchange with the ground, which provides a huge opportunity for very high efficiency heating and cooling and domestic water heating in the building. The exact same equipment, just a different source of that heat. And then on the inside of the building, there's a lot of flexibility in how that equipment can be distributed, whether it's individual units or individual pieces of equipment at every tenant, or it could be centralized equipment distributed throughout the building. And so a lot of flexibility on how heat pumps are deployed. Overall, it's about achieving a much higher efficiency. I would say in terms of what to look for, at this point, inverter-driven variable capacity heat pumps are kind of commonplace, but looking for the really high efficiency options when deploying heat pumps throughout the building. And then, especially when looking at air source heat pumps, leveraging thermal storage can be massive for reducing the total installed capacity. And so I won't get into the weeds of that, but essentially in cold temperatures, you have to buy a lot more heat pump to meet your peak loads. If you leverage thermal storage, you can buy a lot less heat pump, and instead you're just buying a cheap tank of water, and that's a lot more cost effective. And so that's something to keep in mind or to inquire about when looking at heat pump design. Next slide. So as we drive down the energy use in our buildings, kind of that remaining piece, as our buildings become efficient, the remaining juice to squeeze is how do we produce energy, kind of offset the energy use that is being used. PV systems are a great way to do this. Not only do they kind of reduce energy operating costs across the building by reducing how much energy you're consuming from the grid, which can be a great hedge from some of these fluctuating energy prices. They also provide opportunities for income through leasing roof space. If you're an owner of a multifamily building, you can do PPA agreements. There's virtual metering opportunities if you want to, if tenants want to pay for this power that's on the roof through virtual metering or virtual power purchase agreements even. But in general, a lot of opportunities, either building integrated PV, some of the solar shading that we were talking about, roof mounted PV, as you see pictured here. There's opportunities for ground mounted arrays or parking canopies as well. And then ultimately, there's opportunities for pairing battery or solar energy with battery storage as well. And so there's a lot of options on how that can be done, whether it's done through a centralized system at the building scale, or again, opportunities for kind of distributing that battery storage advantage to the tenants themselves through various metering strategies. But again, it's a way to not only monetize roof space, but also potentially hedge against rising energy prices and provide flexibility during peak demand periods, or provide resilience and backup power during grid outages. And with that, I will hand it back over to Andy, I believe.
Thanks, Wyatt. We're going to now set the table a little bit before we get into some of the individual financing programs that we wanted to make sure are on your radar. And in order to set the table, we're going to talk a little bit about the regulatory environment, a little bit about some of the design and property management considerations of taking on projects like this, just to acknowledge that there are many dimensions to how you all look at your buildings and your next development or making upgrades or enhancements to your existing assets. And we're going to elevate a lot of those as best we can in light of some of the unique opportunities, but also challenges that investing intentionally in greater energy efficiency and or renewable energy in projects necessitate. And so I think first, just to kind of call the elephant out in the room, we all recognize that there are complexities to this. And one of the biggest ways of thinking about this first is just simply understanding, well, who's going to be paying the electric bill? And what is the mix between common area paid by landlord and if it is individually metered, which many are, but not all by any stretch, to the responsibility of the tenants. That's one dynamic. A different dynamic is some different optionality that is now that is then listed under some of these different master meter and sub-meter solutions. All to say that in addition to the traditional solution, you might call it, where it's landlord pays common area, and individual Duke-owned, utility-owned sub-meters are spread throughout each unit. There's increasing variations, and we're seeing some of these variations applied right here in our own backyard, much less more commonly in other marketplaces. One variation just simply being that master meter and utility sub-meter. So same infrastructure, but a scenario where the landlord actually pays all of the billing, but obviously has the revenue streams to account for it. That brings in property management and other financial considerations, no question, but it is a structure that is out there and is being worked on in this region and elsewhere. And then the last one to just call attention to is more of a master metered where the landlord's taking on everything and has their own sub-meters. So the landlord-owned sub-meters that are put into the units and taking on full responsibility for billing. And there's better billing software solutions that we'll just introduce at a high level here in a moment that can cover off on things like that. So just to share that there's different ways to slice and dice this, and we certainly acknowledge that. I think one benefit with the stipulation that it can depend sometimes, depending on geographically where you all are operating, on how things work. But at the end of the day, the cost per kilowatt hour that we pay at our home is more than we pay at our business. And so the residential rates versus the commercial rates are an interesting dynamic to keep in mind. And said another way, that when you have a master meter scenario where the landlord is essentially pushing through all electricity for the tenants through a single or a couple of master meters in the relationship that it has with the electric utility, you're going to likely be able to achieve a commercial rate structure right off the bat. And so that's going to save 10, 20, 30% on rates before you even get into the actual provision of the energy and the cost, the long-term cost of that energy over time. And so keep that in mind. It's a solution that is out there right now. It's probably not something that's top of mind maybe for most folks, but if you can handle the back end on the property management side, it's definitely a value add on the front end in terms of making these projects pencil. Another piece of the puzzle to consider is that there are third-party ownership models for solar in particular. Wyatt alluded to this briefly, but at the end of the day, it's going to depend on a combination of how much CapEx you might have to different ways of monetizing tax credits as to whether you'd want to consider a third-party ownership model versus owning the solar system directly. We'll talk a little bit more about the federal tax credits here in a few slides. And then lastly, because it is top of mind, we know for either you all or your colleagues, is the property management piece of the puzzle. So number one, yes, there are new responsibilities if you're taking on any of these variations to how electricity is being pushed into individual units. And so that's a consideration. And in order to take on new responsibilities, you have to have a level of confidence that you have the revenue streams in order to be able to do so. And so there are just that, the revenue streams to take on more of that, but be able to take into your P&L some of the savings that you're able to monetize through a combination of long-term energy investments up front and the ongoing service that you're providing from a billing perspective to be able to ensure, number one, at minimum, your costs are covered. And then beyond that, you might even be in a position to be able to indicate to tenants that they can save on electricity rates in your building, maybe compared to the standard building or the traditional building, that is out there. And so it could be a competitive advantage depending on how much opportunity there is to make to elevate that in the design of your project. And then lastly, in order to assist on the property management side, there are emerging technology solutions. So we have introduced these briefly here, just to say again that while there are new responsibilities, there is an increasing amount of sophistication in some of these new shared solar type technology solutions, both from a metering perspective and from a software and billing perspective, to make the job a little easier to be able to integrate into the way that you manage your buildings. And so that's everything from, as you can see, these physical submeters. So these are tenant-owned, landlord-owned rather, meters in the utility room there of a multifamily building. That happens to come from a product called SolShare. Conversely, on the right, you see just a little bit of a lens of billing software. This comes from a product called IV Energy. These products and solutions are increasingly tying into incumbent property management software integrations, like we list there as well, which again, among other things, hopefully just adds a little piece to the puzzle for you all on the property management side, but not anything significant that would be beyond what you'd want to take on. And to then level set a little bit on the finance side, a couple of things to think about. So one, we talk about conventional buildings, and then what does it mean to have a sustainable building, at least from the sustainable finance or from the clean energy finance perspective. There are a couple of things that are direct outputs of some of the technologies that Wyatt highlighted. And so we just wanted to share some of these things in the second box there to your right around some benefits that might, again, not be top of mind, but might be hyper relevant to tenant satisfaction, tenant attraction, and retention for your buildings to get full and stay full as every bit as much as you want them to. On the core finance side, I think typically, if you look at the conventional kind of commercial mortgage solution there across the top in blue, and then what tends to be some additional pieces to the puzzle when we're bringing forward some version of clean energy finance or sustainable finance in a project, there can be a few additional pieces of the puzzle. Certainly on the front end, when it comes to planning, energy auditing, energy modeling, you're going to have some additional sources of financing to consider: tax credits, grants, loan funds that are bespoke to the energy scope of the project. If you want to pursue those, and we're going to go through those in a second. So there's going to be potentially a little bit more involved in planning, but that's intended to be able to help you encumber what might be higher costs in CapEx up front, but in a way that demonstrates ultimately increased NOI and increased savings potentially too for your tenants over time. And so to that end, here's an illustration that shows a little bit about how that can work. And so in this case, we're just kind of simplifying it to say, your income is your income. But in a scenario where you're able to take on a greater responsibility as the landlord or developer on utilities, there's a little piece of that pie on utilities that you can see transfers over from green to blue in the top image in the middle of the screen to the bottom image in the middle of the screen, which is to say that you can have an opportunity to generate cost savings, find ways of investing in energy infrastructure, solar infrastructure that might have 5 or 10 or 15 years simple payback. But because these items are getting financed over 20, 25, 30 years and their useful lives are often that long as well, that's your hedge. That's your variance where you're going to say, okay, something pays for itself in 10 or 15 years, but I'm getting 25 or 30 years out of it. The difference is your gain and potentially also your tenant's gain, depending on how much there is to go around and how you might structure that. And so we just want to emphasize that while we are all passionate about sustainability and decarbonization, we're also looking at this with an eye on the finances and on NOI, which is, we know it drives a big part of this marketplace. And so I think then as we've set the table a little bit and now getting into some of the individual financing and incentives, the goal here is to spend a very short time on each of these solutions. And hopefully we have identified a solution that is either brand new to you that you might find worth looking into a little bit more, or we've demystified a solution that you've maybe heard of, haven't utilized, and or maybe haven't realized that is being used as prominently as it is maybe in this market or otherwise in the country. And so we're going to kind of zoom through these, and then we'll be sharing out not only the presentation, but a little bit of a cheat sheet one-pager in the coming days after today's presentation to hopefully give folks tools to be able to at least consider a little bit differently, maybe next time around on the development, or think creatively or strategically a little bit differently on future renovations and upgrades that you might be doing in your buildings. And so we're going to present the energy finance tools and be thinking about the fact that a lot of these operate in a public-private fashion, either at the local, state, or federal/national level, first of all, and we'll identify each time with each solution of kind of where that sits. And then again, if we were to oversimplify it and we've put each of these solutions into one of three buckets: grants, tax incentives, and loans. And you probably start in that priority order as well. With grants, free money is never quite free, but it is something that you might want to start with or make sure you're aware of. Tax incentives, like any tax incentive, new markets or historic tax credits or anything like that, these tax incentives have intentionality and planning, but are there and are active and are still around despite federal changes. And then lastly, loans, market rate loans, low interest loans, and the like. And so the first is the Advanced Energy Fund operating through the Ohio Department of Development. This is a program that many of you may be familiar with. It has been around for quite a while, a number of years now. It is funded typically on an annual basis, offered in recurring, at least annual cycles of funding administered competitively by the Ohio Department of Development. So this would necessitate several months of planning kind of on the front end, and then patience on the back end as they make their funding decision. Although at the end of the day, it's certainly intended to fund a lot of the things that we're talking about. You got to start with energy efficiency before you integrate renewable energy into the grant fund in order to be competitive. There are modest, albeit modest, there are examples of multifamily, particularly affordable multifamily projects that have been awarded. Certainly, a lot of the other projects that have been awarded are along the lines of small businesses, nonprofit-owned buildings, local governments, particularly small and rural local governments, colleges and universities, and other education buildings as well. And so it's a tool. It's not the fit for every building. It does have to be an existing building solution. So this is not a new construction financing product, but for the right building, it is certainly a good fit. And I would say in general, for these solutions, one other thing to point out is that we are going to focus on this discussion with our friends at the Apartment Association on elements of these programs and these programs themselves that are best aligned with market rate multifamily buildings. We do have much more content for affordable housing, have a separate presentation and discussion that anyone is welcome to join us again next week, which is mostly not a duplication of this content. We wanted to stay focused on market rate content. There's too much to cover in just one discussion. And so we will look forward to having the affordable housing focused content next week. And we'll have a slide here at the end to make sure that you all know of that upcoming discussion as well, if you'd like to join us. One caveat to everything I just said, just given the significance of this program, and it is the slide. So first of all, this is a program that is not yet available in Ohio and Kentucky. However, it is available in Indiana, and to the credit of our friends at the City of Cincinnati, this is a regional discussion. There are certainly elements of this that are a little bit more centric to the City of Cincinnati and or Hamilton County, but we're all regional in our own ways, and we recognize the success of the region is the success of the city and vice versa, like you all do. And so for that reason, even though this is a low-income focused program, it is a $250 million program in Ohio, $130 million program in Kentucky, and an existing active $182 million program in Indiana. At the end of the day, there are heavy subsidies for 80% AMI buildings and below, 100% cost coverage of existing building energy upgrades, up to about $25,000, $28,000 per unit, both single and multifamily. This program is live in Indiana. It's called the Indiana Energy Savers Program. The state energy offices, including the ODOD in Ohio and its equivalent in Kentucky are working with Department of Energy. They have their ducks in a row. They are waiting for final approval from the U.S. Department of Energy. That has been on a 15-month delay. And so nobody knows exactly when it's going to be released, but we are all optimistic that it will be soon. However, again, wanted to emphasize that it is an active program today in Indiana. And lastly, albeit also not covering Ohio, but important as a region to recognize that there are rebates for Duke Energy customers in both Northern Kentucky and large stretches of Indiana where Duke Energy operates. That covers most projects. It covers both new construction and major renovation. There's a link there, probably not new news to you all, but definitely don't want to overlook those. We do see that Duke Energy rebates do sometimes get overlooked in the process of new construction design. And so we definitely encourage you to be thinking about that and or talk to your teammates and professionals to be able to help in making sure that you're considering maximizing Duke Energy rebates throughout any type of investment in your building infrastructure. So bringing it back local now, flipping from grants and rebates over to tax incentives. We want to go both local, state, and federal on tax incentives. Starting first with local. On the smaller side of multifamily, as probably many of you may be aware, but there have been ongoing evolutions of the city's lead CRA abatement, which is really now just a CRA abatement. However, for 1 to 4 unit properties that are achieving certain levels of LEED or home energy rating system or other related green certifications, you can get an extra couple $100,000 of a cap on the amount of the property that can be abated. And so at the end of the day, it is designed to help you financially model some additional CapEx potentially upfront to achieve those standards, but as a means of that operational savings over time that, again, in many cases when we're involved in financial modeling, that financial modeling and the savings over time, looking at the net present value of those savings over time, can more than pay for the additional CapEx upfront. Then when we go to loans, we have our friends over at the Cincinnati Development Fund. And so I think when we were talking earlier about the Cincinnati Green Bank Coalition, to the credit of the folks at the Cincinnati Development Fund, they have been working vigorously, both internally and with partners, to expand the capacity of their various tools in their toolbox to be able to afford more capital upfront for the types of projects that we're talking about. And so they have done just that. They are actively piloting expansions and extensions of their existing tools, but with an eye on and specific underwriting criteria around the energy efficient design, solar energy, and the like. And so if you go to them with a highly efficient building or desires to do that, they are going to embrace you because they are ahead of the game when it comes to our local lenders and understanding that a more efficient building means lower operating expenses, which means you can afford, in many cases, more debt service up front to be able to take on those investments. So whether it's some of the traditional tools around pre-construction or mini-perm, they are also very open to bridge lending and bridge lending against tax credits, grants, and other related funding sources that folks might be coming up with, particularly for clean energy investments. And then lastly, on the business lending side, they are increasingly active as well. And so for businesses that are operating in the commercial real estate development space, and that certainly includes the clean energy development space, whether you're a solar installer or the like, and have unique needs for small business loans to expand your capacity as a business, they are also serving that marketplace as well. Want to jump now to federal tax credits and incentives. And so this is another incentive in the tax incentive category. This is a federal incentive. This is not gone. There were a lot of changes in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act in July of 2025, certainly in this space. But there are tax credits still available for commercial buildings, and we wanted to emphasize that today. There is, first in the upper left quadrant for solar, there is a solar tax credit that can go up to 70%, although likely more like a 30 or 40% for most of the projects that you all might be working on. There's a baseline of 30% for that tax credit and various adders that helps boost that tax credit up to as high as 70%. Importantly, there is a deadline for the solar piece of this tax credit. The project has to be in service by 12/31 of 27. And so there is a need to really emphasize expediency in getting a project fully online by that tax credit deadline. And so that is certainly something to keep in mind. And if you've had a project shelved or considering a solar project, keep in mind that that is now there's a clock that is fairly near term, although you still have 20 months to be able to tackle that one. When it comes to then battery storage and geothermal that Wyatt alluded to earlier, the federal tax credit is there too, and it's not going anywhere. And so give serious consideration to some of these technologies that might not be commonplace yet, but might be more viable than you realize, particularly with respect to the fact that that same federal tax credit is here and present for that technology, but it's going to be here for the next several years and only begins phasing out in 2032. And so it's definitely worth considering given the long-term tail that those technologies have. And lastly, which does have a very short time frame, but is still there, is the federal tax credit for certain projects installing electric vehicle charging inside of certain geographies that can gain access to a 30% federal tax credit. In each of these, there's also two ways to utilize these for-profit entities: directly on your own taxes for those that have a tax appetite, or secondly, through the transferability marketplace, or in other words, your ability to sell to an open marketplace. And there are buyers and there are exchanges out there that may well want your credit and may pay you 85, 90, 92 cents on the dollar if it's more cost effective for whatever reason for a third party to use your tax credit versus yourself. We now want to flip over to our friends up in Columbus and talk a little bit about a state agency that you may or may not be familiar with called the Ohio Air Quality Development Authority. We're not going to go into a great amount of detail except to say that it's a state agency that's been around for about 50 years and has multiple programs that we have seen increasingly bring value to projects, both new construction and major renovation. And so just to demystify them a little bit, they are increasingly commonplace in the built environment. There is an active portfolio of commercial projects that they're managing north of $3 billion across the state. And so there's increasing precedent for the utilization of these tools, which we've seen work both for small businesses and for development projects. This first program is called the Small Business Clean Air Program. If you all are familiar with what used to be called the Clean Air Resource Center Program, it is now under a name change, and this is the future state of the program effective July 1st of 2026. All to say that this is primarily for owner-occupied small projects under $2 million, allowing for owners of buildings to make energy efficient upgrades and receive both a property and sales tax exemption on the value of those upgrades, sales tax exemption on construction costs, and property tax exemption for the useful life of the assets. More apropos for this group is the Clean Air Improvement Program, which is allowed for projects that go north of 2 million. And certainly we have seen increasing number of multifamily projects in this region from folks, some of whom are represented on this call today, to utilize this financing tool to be able to reduce operating costs as a means of justifying meaningful investments in energy efficiency and renewable energy upfront in projects to measurably reduce both carbon and energy in the built environment. And so at the end of the day, it's bringing forward some of those same sales and property tax exemptions. However, those sales and property tax exemptions are throttled based on how efficient the design of your project is. So if you're a little less efficient, but you're still hitting a 15% savings, generally what we see is that mechanical, electrical, plumbing scope is eligible for these exemptions. If you're north of 50% savings designed compared to baseline building code, a larger portion of your project scope is eligible. And that can range from, typically at starting point might be the amount of debt that you're bringing on, because the mechanism for the state agency to bring to bear these resources is through a conduit bond financing. And so if you're financing 70% of the project, you might want to start there in terms of modeling what percentage of the project, if you hit that 50% threshold, could be eligible, although there's certainly a lot of other T's and C's to cross over to ultimately understand how much of a project is able to go through that program. However, it can be very beneficial to make meaningful investments in the built environment. On the financing side, another one to talk through here at the local level is offered for a long time now, more than 20 years, through Hamilton County and offered currently as a banking partner by Northside Bank. And for the benefit of multifamily, we're again talking about that smaller end of the multifamily scale, 2 to 4 unit investment properties, in such a way that Hamilton County makes linked deposits to Northside Bank, which allows Northside Bank to reduce the market rate that is charged to investment property, energy, and home improvement upgrades, getting it down to 4 to 5% interest rate, which is inclusive of a 3% subsidy. The Hamilton County linked deposit is allowing for that subsidy to be passed through to the owners. And so this is definitely something worth checking out for smaller properties. The state has long had a revolving loan fund as well. This is going to look at minimum 15% energy savings. This is not, however, necessarily positioned for multifamily properties themselves, but we did want to share it with you all because we recognize that many of you are small business owners. You may have your own buildings with your own headquarters, offices, et cetera. And this may be a resource for a project more so like that. And then lastly, a tool that hopefully many have run into at this stage called Property Assessed Clean Energy. But it's certainly worth a look on future projects, whether you're talking about new construction, renovation, or refinancing, recapitalization. There's an element of just about any kind of commercial real estate transaction where PACE financing can be a part of the capital stack. For new construction deals, we see it's typically 30 to 35% of the capital stack. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of unique attributes to PACE in the capital stack. It is non-recourse, long-term debt going out to 30 years that can transfer upon sale to a future building owner. And so there's a lot of unique aspects of it that are very different. And thus, a lot of times PACE is being lent alongside traditional financing in a way that is complementary to the rest of the capital stack. At the end of the day, the city of Cincinnati has embraced PACE in a number of ways, and OAQDA can also support PACE somewhat more recently through some streamlined approval processes that both save time and costs in many cases from what we've seen, particularly if you're stacking PACE financing alongside some of the Ohio Air Quality Development Authority's property tax and sales tax exemption programs. And so we want to make sure we're boiling this down for the local group to understand that these things are happening in our region. We know that it's different thinking. We know that there's many dimensions to this, both on the front and back end, in terms of design and financing, all the way through property management and tenant retention and attraction. However, there's at least 5 projects, and these are just kind of ones we can put our finger on physically today, on multifamily projects in our region. No doubt there's more than that. Most likely there's no definitive database for these kinds of things, only to say that there's an increasing amount of expertise in our marketplace, not just from professional services, but from you all as developers and property managers of multifamily buildings as well. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to figure out how to work together as a marketplace to allow this to be something closer to commonplace when the right economics are in place. Another element of this is that there are north of 30 local governments, and this is covering just Southwest Ohio and Northern Kentucky, that have passed PACE legislation since the solution has been enabled going back 15 years in Ohio legislation. That has led to north and probably well north of $175 million in deal volume. And so you're certainly not going to be the first or anything close to it. That means there's been lenders, senior lenders and bank lenders that have lent alongside PACE at that volume as well. And there is an increasing amount of expertise out there in the marketplace for you to consider as you are considering the application of these tools. When it comes to the Ohio Air Quality Development Authority tools, again, the agency's been around for 50 years. They are not new to the game. However, the current market solutions that they have evolved in a more usable way to their credit. And so there are at least 20 projects in the recent handful of years since these programs have been as accessible as they are that have closed in Southwest Ohio, and certainly many in the pipeline. And so, again, there's an increasing amount of precedent and an increasing amount of lenders, lawyers, bankers, and others that have worked with these programs and are positioned to be able to support more projects from going through these programs. Lastly, although we haven't talked too much about EV charging, it's certainly an important piece of the ecosystem. And there are actually over 700 apartment listings today alone in the marketplace that list access to EV charging as an amenity in those properties. And so you may not realize it's quite that commonplace. We want it to be 7,000 and more, but it is increasingly commonplace, and it's been great to see more and more multifamily properties take on that infrastructure. This is a case study we're not going to spend too much time on, but we'll certainly have these slides in the takeaways, only to really give a real demonstration of an instance where, and this is a real project where there is an ability here to be able to increase operating income, to be able to service more debt, and ultimately increase NOI on the property at the end of the day, leading to a higher market value and sale value. And that at the end of the day, to varying degrees, I know, but that at the end of the day is what makes this market tick. And certainly, although with some financial modeling that might be an extension of what you all would consider commonplace, with the sophistication of our marketplace and the complexity of a lot of projects that are happening today, we often see that adding a little bit of hair on the deal with respect to energy specific solutions is not even as complicated as what most projects are already used to taking on if they're using new markets or historic tax credits or other long-time market-based solutions that have been out there. I talked a little bit earlier about the fact that this is a series of workshops, and we are looking forward to having a few more workshops. Feel free to write these down, share these with friends. I did mention that there is a second multifamily, but focused on affordable. We're doing with our friends over at the Cincinnati Development Fund next week. But then there is a range of other solutions, including a deep dive with architects and engineers, where we'll be, of course, with our friends at CMTA in the city again, hosted by Fifth Third a little bit later in the month, rounding out with some new important, albeit wonky, but every bit as important regulatory updates with some of the work the city has done with respect to one of the most significant energy bills that Ohio has passed in a very long time, House Bill 15. So there's our information. I know that we technically, when we were going to all be in person with you, had this on until 10 o'clock. We didn't have the benefit of being virtual by having some of that in-person networking, but we would certainly entertain any questions here as we're winding down, knowing that the panelists are more than happy to stick around for a period of time here and certainly be able to follow up individually. And we wanted to make sure you had the contact information to be able to do so. So with that, we have a question from Patrice. Go ahead. Hi, Patrice.
Hi, Andy. How you doing?
Good. Nice to see you.
You too. My question's actually for Nikki. Regarding the grants that you said are available, is that on the CDC level, and are the CDCs aware of that?
So I spoke about our
It was your first slide.
the rally program specifically through strategies to end homelessness. That is that funding is directed to them and through their network. So it is they are working with their partners at Free Store Food Bank and Talbert House specifically.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
Other questions? Feel free to either raise your hand virtually here or just jump in, since we're, I think, a pretty friendly group and probably most of us know each other.
And if you don't have any questions, please do take the survey. I know surveys are annoying, but because this is a grant-funded project or training session, it's kind of a requirement of the grant that we take a survey. So appreciate it if you can answer the few questions that are on there.
I don't have any
Yes, indeed.
specific questions, but I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time. This was really informative, and have a lot of notes and questions for my development team. So worthwhile. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. Yeah, get those development folks on it. Sounds good.
And I do see a couple of IRO owners from our association here. I had asked the team if we could get those very specific slides for independence. We're doing that session on May 27th about building your business, talking a lot about financing and rehabbing. So I think this information then transferred to that group will be really important. So you'll get a second chance to look at this, maybe with a little more detailed information for the IRO side, then again on the 27th.
Great, indeed. Yes, we'll have both a PowerPoint and again, a one-pager in physical form, which is actually a two-pager in PDF form, a little bit of a cheat sheet, if you will, that tries its best as possible to summarize this rundown of several programs that we wanted to at least introduce y'all to if you weren't already familiar.
And Nikki had also put in the chat that we will have this available in the portal. So Justin, for you and for everyone else who's here representing and needs to take more information back to the development team, you will have this in the recorded format, as well as all the information that Andy just mentioned, available to share with your team. So you don't have to have all the notes and try to remember exactly what was said. You'll be able to let them experience it for themselves as well.
That would have saved us a lot of time. I'm kidding.
Sorry, Sean.
Or note taking, all good.
Well, if there are no more questions, I will thank vigorously Rebecca and the Apartment Association membership, along with my friends here with the city and CMTA, for allowing the space to put this on, and for you all for taking an hour plus a few minutes out of your day to join us. Hope to see you in some of the other events upcoming here in a very, very busy Earth Month and certainly beyond. And so thanks again for the time. I'll turn it over to Rebecca to close us out.
I just want to echo what Andy said. One, thanking their team for being here, for putting this on for us today, and for our continued partnership. We are looking forward to doing maybe a couple more sessions virtually, and maybe inviting them out to a couple of our events to explore this further. But thanks to all of you from the association and our visitors for joining today, for taking part and supporting these initiatives as we go forward. We're just always trying to bring things to you that support you and that help in your business. Have a terrific day, and we will see you soon.
This has been great. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a blessed day.